Good afternoon. This is Jim Ray with the Road to the Autry Masters. We're talking with artists of the Masters of the American West at the Autry Museum in Los Angeles. Today we are very happy to have with us our old friend Luke Frazier from Cache Valley, Utah. Welcome, Luke.
That's it. Hey, good to see you again, Jim.
Glad to have you here. Luke was in the Masters for several years, and he went away, and we're happy to have him back now. So we're going to talk a little bit about his background and about the work that he's doing for us. Luke, I'd like to start these things off, get a little better sense about where you came from in your professional career. Could you share with us a little bit about your artistic upbringing?
Sure. I just redid my biography, and going back to some of my earlier memories of becoming an artist, and most of those memories include me with my father out, treasure hunting and looking for lost items, and hunting and fishing and spending nights under the stars, and those early forays into the nature and the wilderness, along with a lot of my brothers growing up, really instilled my love for the outdoors. And the artistic flair, I think, came from my dad, who was a very fine artist himself, Jesse Frazier. And I was always drawing and sketching and doing things of that nature, sculpting from a very young age. And that just kind of cultivated who I became and the types of subject matter that I paint. Getting to the Autry, I was in the first show that ever happened in 96, 97, when John Garrity was at the helm, and it was the AIWA show back then, and he converted that into the Masters of the American West. So I'm not a stranger. This isn't my first rodeo, but you get busy as an artist, and you take on a lot, and you have clients and commissions, and to put out the best quality, you just can't do everything all the time, which is unfortunate, but it's really great to be back. I love my Autry Masters artists, the staff, and the museum especially.
Great. So let's talk about what you've sent over to us this year. I think the first one that I want to get into is Between Earth and Sky. What's the story with that guy?
Well, as an artist, I don't know if, you're always trying to rediscover yourself in some aspects. I started at a very young age in the art world, art business, like 18, 19 years old. And you search out your heroes, and you try to learn how to paint. The style and the subject matter that you paint lends to the type of art that you make. And in the end, I paint the things that I love, and the life that I live, and the things that I see. And hopefully people come around to my way of thinking as an artist. That particular painting, I spend a lot of time chasing critters and with a camera, and the landscape they live in. And that's a bull off the Antelope Island there in the middle of the Great Salt Lake. They have an island there that has a lot of buffalo, a lot of mule deer, a lot of bighorn sheep. And when you're out there, you see the reflection of the whole valley in the Great Salt Lake, although it's very low right now. The water level is low. But I had this idea of a very big, ornery buffalo, which they usually are. They're pretty ornery. And I've been doing a series of buffalo pieces of just great big head studies, really thick paint. They're one eye catching light, looking right through you as the viewer, because you're no threat to them. But this particular painting came about by being at the Antelope Island, thinking of, you know, the earth and then the massive sky, but the reflection of this animal in the ground.
Yeah.
This is going to be a bigger painting. I'm going to do a very big painting of this. Not exactly the same, but something along those lines. I just think that I've always liked the reflection of water.
Yeah. And to the degree that you might be able to capture more of the sky and the water in a larger canvas, might be a very interesting approach there.
You know, and I'm a big fan of nocturnist painters, like some to come to mind, Frederick Remington, Frank Tenney Johnson. I like the rudimentary aspect of their paint, and the you know, a paint stroke says so much. But just to get that almost an evening feel or an early morning feel where the colors are rich, and you have a rich sky, and that's reflected in the foreground. It's just, you know, it's something that I love the idea. I love the idea, and hopefully, you know, going to the genesis of that painting, and it's not a very big painting. I think it's 20 inches by 20 inches, but I think it's going to be a real solid, larger piece.
Yeah. So let's move on to Call of the Wild.
Sure.
What can you tell us about that?
You know, I wrote in my artist statement, you know, I'm a big fan of Jack London. Read all of his books. I'm an avid reader. Well, listener. I paint and I listen. All kinds of books, all kinds of subject matter, all kinds of authors. And that particular painting, you know, along the same lines of doing, thinking out of the box, the way I paint, sometimes I'll paint a subject in a very big, vast landscape. Other times I'll do an intimate close-up, and this particular painting is one of the latter, an intimate close-up. And I just love the lighting and the mist or the breath coming out of the wolf. You know, and those Jack London stories invoke in me as an artist or as an outdoorsman. You know, a lot of the time you're alone. And you have to come to grips with a lot of things when you're alone in the wilderness. I've been in Alaska many, many years, chasing moose, chasing wolves, chasing whatever I can chase, the light. That particular painting tied into that story, The Call of the Wild, about one man's, you know, your survival instinct when all you can rely on is yourself. And I kind of tied that into how a lone wolf is, how he survives on a single setting versus a pack setting. You know, they survive in a pack mentality. That's how wolves survive.
Yeah.
Being alone, a lone wolf, is a much different story. But this piece just, you know, it invokes in me communication with the single wolf with the pack, the lighting aspect, and it tied into that story of Call of the Wild. And so that's the title. It just kind of all fit.
Yeah.
But I like these closer, intimate images or scenes sometimes because it invokes different emotional aspects in people. Some people can really identify with that. So sometimes they're successful, sometimes they're not. But that's kind of where I was going with this and others that I've been working on.
Okay. I'm guessing this other is your miniature Circle of Warmth?
Yes. Yes.
Tell us about that.
You know, pretty simple painting. I didn't mean to do paintings that seemed like animals are just alone in this world that just survive, but they are. You know, foxes, I just, you know, they can survive in such austere environments, just bitter cold, super hot summer heat. But this one, you know, they'll lay on a bank of snow and wrap themselves in their tail, and they're just cozy as can be.
Yeah.
And this particular piece is, you know, looking kind of down on top of it. So again, it's a different point of view, something that, you know, not just a fox from the side walking left or right. I love foxes, and this is just kind of one of those scenes that I just thought very appealing. You know, it just is something that I really enjoyed, and hopefully, you know, people will see that as well. But it's a different point of view. It's a, you know, looking down on top versus something, you know, where the fox is actually doing something. But I love the colors, the warmth of the fox against the cooler snow. But you know, those type of scenes, they just, I don't know, they mean a lot to me, you know. Yeah. And I do so many studies and so many ideas from different points of view. It's always good to see one come together.
Well, let's talk about your process a little bit. How do you decide that this is a subject that I want to represent in my art?
Sorry, I'm gonna put my glasses on. I can see you a little clearer. You know, I am inspired by so many different things. You know, and I don't, you know, people, when they go to my website or see my work or have seen my work, I've illustrated, early on, I illustrated for years and years, mainly just doing paintings that I would do for a gallery that would get published with Gray's Sporting Journal, with Sporting Classics, with Field and Stream, you know, Reader's Digest, condensed books, stories that you know, I would read a story and I would come up with ideas. And but so I paint a lot of different subject matter. I paint human figures hunting and fishing, and bird dogs chasing quail. Anything that has to do with the sporting and outdoor world, I tend to love to do that.
Yeah, I tend to think of you as a wildlife and sporting artist. Those are the two broad categories that I tend to see your work in.
Yeah, you know, I don't want to pigeonhole myself. I've just, you know, maybe I should just cut it all and just say Luke Frazier, American artist.
Yeah.
Because I paint a lot of the things that I just live and do. Like I do a lot of underwater big game fishing scenes, like marlin chasing bait balls, and you know, barracuda and all kinds of things like that, which you wouldn't think that I would do, but I've done them forever, and I really enjoy those things. But you know, being in the outdoors, seeing different critters, you know, spending a lot of my time hunting and fishing and hiking, and just those things just tend to find their way into my artwork, and I can find inspiration from anything. You know, going to museums and see how other artists solve problems in their paintings, different styles. I mean, very rudimentary to very you know, super high detail. So many artists do so many different styles.
Sure.
I love to see it. You know, I'm not dictating my style on them, and they're not on me, but you know, I'm just doing it the way I do it. And so I'm inspired by so many different things from so many different areas.
So over the course of your career, have you noticed that your process has evolved in any way?
Absolutely. Yeah. Obviously, you know, being that I paint a lot of different subject matter, animals in landscape, animals in the wild, sportsmen, you know, there's a lot of different backgrounds. So you have to paint the landscape adequately to fit what you're trying to say with your painting. And each animal or person has to be in the correct setting. What I mean by that is you're not going to paint a rhinoceros from Africa in a you know, an Arizona setting,
Right.
and vice, you know, where like moose, you paint them in an Alaskan setting, or however you paint them. But my process has changed a lot You know, your theory on color. I've always enjoyed a lot of color. I enjoy a very heavy impasto application with my paint, and but I've been playing a lot with different media, and that would be, I've been doing a lot of watercolor, and I've always done watercolor and acrylic paintings, mainly when I do my sketches, just to add quick color to a pencil sketch. And the process of watercolor painting versus oil is almost flip-flopped.
Yeah.
Where the white of your painting on a watercolor is the white of the paper. And so you're painting light into dark, whereas oil painting, you're usually, you know, you have a middle ground, and then you start putting in all the darks, and then, you know, playing the values off of each other and building up that paint. And watercolor is the exact opposite. So I've actually tried doing paintings in oil like I would a watercolor. So doing very thin washes. They have a very interesting effect, although it doesn't translate the same on an oil-based ground versus watercolor on paper. Does that make sense?
Sure.
But there's beauty when you look at artists at a museum or in a show. They're always like this close to the art because they're just really trying to figure out, yeah, well, how did he do that, you know, or how did they get that depth to those paint strokes? Watercolor dries very flat, but you can still get a lot of that, the richness and the texture you can build up with a brush or a sponge. You know, I always go back to Bob Kuhn as the primer for everything I do, because, you know, I studied with him for 20 plus years and tried to climb into his head and watched him paint, although he painted with acrylic paint, which dries in 2 minutes versus oil paint, which takes 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But his acrylic paintings had almost looked like oil paintings. Just his knowledge of how he put things in and the layering, just masterful. And so I guess, you know, to answer your question, I try a lot of different things. I still sculpt a lot, but I never put those out in front of the public that much. And seeing things in the round, like a lump of clay, and how the light bounces off it, and, you know, those I paint like I sculpt. You know, I try to paint very blocky in the beginning and just really build up the structure. Mm-hmm. And I really love drawing it out, you know, using pencil and paint thinner to push graphite around. You know, everything is a tool. That, you know, as an artist, everything at your disposal is just a tool. You're painting with tools. Painting is drawing with paint. That's how I feel about it. And it's almost, and I treat it like sculpture. I always try to see the light and the dark and the reflected light, and I want to see that form fairly quickly. And you know, very tight line drawing drives me insane. So I like to see, you know, when I do drawings, I'll use a brush and I'll put in the shadow shapes and I'll put in some halftones, and I see structure very quickly. Yeah. And that's basically my process. You know, there's really no secret to what I do. It's just, you know, my learning and training by studying other artists, by, you know, actually being out there and doing it firsthand with painting landscape on location, or, you know, in the studio. You know, it's a process, and you change as you grow, you change as your knowledge increases. You know, I told you at the beginning I'm a colorist, but, you know, lately I've been doing more grisaille paintings, just white and black, just to really try to understand the value shifts. And then when you have a color, you know, how do you understand that color as it shifts in value too? Yeah. You know, I will take images of my paintings and I'll make them a black and white, And sometimes you're just like, wow, this kind of falls apart in some areas because the values are wrong.
Right.
You know, if it's in color, you kind of don't see it as well, or I don't. And
It
when I
becomes
switch
real
back and
apparent in
forth,
black and white.
yes, yes. And so for me, that's just part of the process. And maybe I'm very late to the game on some of the value shifts that I do. Also trying to really understand warm and cool gray. You know, I see like Neon Situ and ZS Liang, these Chinese uh, these guys that have studied in China. I think they're masters at the warm and cool grays. And you know, it just me personally, I just want to understand the nuance of the art, you know. And so I guess I'm never satisfied with how do I say this? I'm never satisfied with just staying where I'm at. I always want to grow, you know. I always want to understand it or simplify. You know, sometimes I get into a painting and I'm like, man, I just really lost some magic here. You know, I should have stopped painting an hour ago.
Yeah.
You know, and that happens. And so
That
you
does
have to
happen.
almost paint it back out. You
Yeah.
know, take out some of that really cool detail you thought was awesome and just say, well, if that stroke doesn't work, or if that value's wrong, you got to change it.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
Luke,
so
thank you so much for taking some time to share with us and sharing with us about your background and your style and your technique. I hope that we get to see you in Los Angeles in February at the Masters. And thank you so much for joining us.
I'll be there. Look forward to seeing you and your family and the Autry family. And it's good to be back.
We'll look forward to seeing you too.
Thanks, Jim.